Most people think power comes from intelligence, talent, or aggression. They are wrong. The real advantage, the one that quietly dominates every room, is emotional stability. While others react, panic, explain, defend, and overextend, the emotionally stable individual remains calm, measured, and unshaken. And in every environment, business, relationships, conflict, leadership, the calm one controls the outcome. This audiobook will show you why emotional stability is not a personality trait. It is a discipline, and once you build it, nothing and no one can move you again. Chapter 1. Emotional stability is power, not passivity. Most people misunderstand calmness. They think if you're calm, you're weak. If you don't react, you lost. If you don't push back immediately, you're being dominated. That belief is why most people stay trapped. Emotional stability is not passivity. It is controlled force. There is a massive difference between being quiet because you are afraid and being quiet because you are in control. One is paralysis. The other is power. That's the key. The emotionally stable person is not frozen. They are choosing. They choose when to speak. They choose when to act. They choose when to stay silent. Everyone else is reacting. And reaction is always a lower position. You have a choice. You can let the moment dictate your behavior, or you can govern yourself regardless of the moment. That choice is where power begins. Look at any high-pressure environment. Negotiations, leadership meetings, crisis situations, confrontations. The person who reacts first usually loses, not because they're wrong, but because they revealed themselves too early. Emotionally reactive people leak information. Their tone changes. Their body tightens. Their words rush out. They show fear. They show ego. They show urgency. And urgency is weakness. That's not an insult. It's a law. When you rush, you give the other side leverage. When you explode, you hand them control. Power is restraint. Control is dominance. Say it again. Power is restraint. Control is dominance. Think about the leaders you've respected most in your life. Not the loudest ones. Not the most emotional ones. The ones who stayed composed when everything was on fire. They didn't panic. They didn't over-explain. They didn't react to every provocation. They absorbed pressure without leaking it. That's not softness. That's strength. That's emotional stability. And emotional stability changes how people treat you. People test reactive individuals. They hesitate around stable ones. Because when someone cannot move you emotionally, they don't know how to control you. You don't need their permission to stay calm. You don't need their approval to pause. You don't need to prove anything in the moment. That urge to prove, to defend, to correct, to fire back, that's not confidence. That's insecurity disguised as speed. Here's where most people get it wrong. They think strength means responding faster. It doesn't. Strength means responding cleaner, slower, more precise, with less emotional noise. The calm individual sees more. They notice tone shifts. They read body language. They hear what isn't being said. The reactive individual is blind. Their emotions fill the room. Their mind narrows. Their options shrink. You have a choice. You can react and feel powerful for 5 seconds. Or you can stay composed and remain powerful long-term. That's the key. Short-term emotional release costs long-term authority. Let's make this practical. Someone challenges you publicly. Your instinct says, respond immediately. Correct them. Defend your position. Win the moment. But emotional stability asks a different question. Does responding now increase my control or reduce it? Sometimes silence is the answer. Sometimes a pause is the power move. Sometimes letting the other person talk reveals more than interrupting ever could. Power is restraint. Control is dominance. This is not about being nice. It's not about being agreeable. It's not about suppressing yourself. It's about timing. Emotionally stable people understand timing. They don't discharge emotion just because it exists. They contain it. They direct it. They use it when it serves them. Look at high-level negotiators. They don't argue emotionally. They don't escalate. They don't chase agreement. They wait. They let the other side feel the discomfort. They allow silence to work for them, because silence creates pressure, and pressure forces mistakes. Reactive people relieve pressure. Stable people let it build. That's dominance. You don't need to win the argument. You need to control the outcome. That's the difference between emotional people and effective people. Another hard truth. If your emotions control your behavior, your environment controls your emotions. Read that again. If your emotions control your behavior, your environment controls your emotions. That means anyone can push your buttons. Anyone can hijack your focus. Anyone can pull you into chaos. That's not strength. That's vulnerability. Emotional stability flips the equation. Now your internal state is self-governed. Now external chaos loses its grip. Now you decide who gets access to your energy. You have a choice. React or remain grounded. That choice defines your position in every interaction. This chapter is not asking you to feel nothing. It's asking you to feel without leaking, to experience emotion without letting it drive, to hold intensity without collapsing into it. That is discipline. It's not about emotionlessness. It's about emotional command. Say it clearly. Power is restraint. Control is dominance. Make that your filter. Before you speak, before you respond, before you act, ask yourself, am I choosing this or am I reacting? Because reaction is automatic. Choice is power. Here's the identity shift. You are no longer someone who reacts to pressure. You are someone who absorbs it. You are no longer someone who explodes when tested. You are someone who remains unreadable. You don't need their permission to stay composed. You don't need to prove strength through noise. Your stability speaks before you ever do. That's the foundation. And without it, nothing else in this audiobook works. Because emotional stability is the base layer of dominance. Now you understand what power really looks like. But here's the next problem. Even when people understand this, they still lose control in the moment. Why? Because the reactive mind is always at a disadvantage. And that's exactly what we're breaking down next. Chapter 2. The reactive mind is always at a disadvantage. Reaction feels natural, feels justified, feels human. But reaction is not neutral. Reaction always places you behind the event. By the time you react, something else has already decided your state. Someone's words, someone's tone, someone's pressure, someone's disrespect. The moment you react, you admit something powerful and dangerous. You were moved. And if it moves you, it controls you. That's the key. If it moves you, it controls you. Most people don't lose because they're unintelligent. They lose because they react. They let emotions spike, and that spike collapses judgment. Anger narrows perception. Defensiveness distorts reality. Urgency kills precision. You don't think clearly when your nervous system is lit up. You think fast. You think loud. You think emotionally. And emotional thinking always trades long-term advantage for short-term relief. You have a choice. You can discharge emotion immediately, or you can delay it and keep leverage. That delay is where control lives. Let's talk about anger. Anger convinces you that acting now is necessary. That if you don't respond immediately, you're weak. That if you don't strike back, you've lost. That's a lie. Anger doesn't make you powerful. It makes you predictable. Angry people escalate. They raise their voice. They exaggerate. They overshare. They reveal intent too early. And the moment you reveal intent, the other side adjusts. You don't need their permission to pause. You don't need to explain why you're not reacting. You don't owe anyone instant access to your emotions. If it moves you, it controls you. Now defensiveness. Defensiveness is fear wearing armor. When someone challenges your identity, your competence, or your status, defensiveness rushes in. You explain. You justify. You argue details. You try to correct their perception. But here's the truth. Defensiveness puts you in a lower position because you're responding to their frame instead of holding your own. You're saying, "Let me prove myself to you." That's not authority. Authority doesn't explain itself under pressure. Authority waits. Authority lets accusations hang without chasing them. Authority understands that not every challenge deserves engagement. You have a choice. Defend or remain centered. Only one of those preserves power. Urgency is the most dangerous emotion of all, because urgency disguises itself as importance. It has to be decided now. You need to answer immediately. This can't wait. Most of the time, that's manipulation. Urgency forces rushed decisions. Rushed decisions are sloppy decisions. And sloppy decisions favor whoever created the urgency. If someone pressures you emotionally, they are trying to reduce your options. Calm expands options. Urgency collapses them. That's not an accident. If it moves you, it controls you. Think about every mistake you regret. Most of them were not caused by lack of information. They were caused by emotional pressure. You felt pushed. You felt cornered. You felt rushed. So you reacted. And reaction locked in a suboptimal outcome. The reactive mind always chooses speed over accuracy. But dominance requires patience. That's the trade-off. You can feel fast, or you can be effective. You don't get both. Let's ground this in reality. In conversations, the reactive person interrupts. They rush to correct. They rush to assert. They rush to win. The controlled person listens longer. They let the other person expose their position. They gather information while the reactive person is leaking it. Silence is not empty. Silence is data collection. And data creates advantage. That's the key. In conflict, reaction escalates. Tone rises. Language sharpens. Egos collide. Control de-escalates without surrendering position. The controlled person doesn't match intensity. They absorb it. And absorption frustrates aggressors. because aggression needs resistance to justify itself. When you don't react, the other side has nowhere to go. They either calm down or overplay their hand. Both benefit you. If it moves you, it controls you. Here's a hard truth most people don't want to hear. If someone can trigger you on demand, they can steer you on demand. That means your buttons are access points. Your anger, your pride, your fear of looking weak. Those are not strengths. Those are vulnerabilities. And the world is full of people who know how to press them. Emotional stability closes those access points. It doesn't mean you don't feel. It means feelings don't get the steering wheel. You do. This chapter is about positioning. Reaction puts you inside the situation. Control places you above it. From above, you see patterns. From inside, you feel overwhelmed. From above, you choose. From inside, you are chosen for. You have a choice. Stay inside the emotion, or rise above it. That choice defines outcomes. So what do you do differently? Starting now? First, delay. Not forever. Just long enough to regain command. Seconds matter. Breaths matter. Second, reduce expression. Say less. Move less. Reveal less. The less emotional data you leak, the stronger your position. Third, observe. Watch how people behave when you don't react. Watch who grows uncomfortable. Watch who escalates. Watch who exposes intention. That information is power, and power belongs to the calm. Say the rule again. If it moves you, it controls you. Make that your internal alarm. Anytime you feel urgency, anytime you feel anger spike, anytime you feel the need to prove, pause. That pause is the difference between dominance and regret. By now, you should see the pattern. Emotional instability hands control outward. Emotional discipline pulls control inward. And the person with internal control always wins over time. Not loudly, not immediately, but consistently. You don't need their permission to stay composed. You don't need to match chaos to survive it. Your restraint is your leverage. And now that you understand why reaction always loses, we need to go deeper. Because the next level of control is not just staying calm. It's becoming impossible to manipulate. That's where true dominance begins. Chapter 3. Calm people are harder to manipulate. Manipulation doesn't start with logic. It starts with emotion, fear, guilt, ego, urgency. Those are the hooks. And if someone can hook your emotions, they can steer your behavior. That's the rule. Manipulation never forces you. It moves you. And if it moves you, it controls you. Here's the core truth of this chapter. No emotional hook, no leverage. Say it again. No emotional hook, no leverage. That's the key. Most people think manipulation looks obvious. It doesn't. It looks like concern. It looks like pressure disguised as importance. It looks like just helping. It looks like disappointment. And it works because most people react emotionally before they think structurally. Calm people don't. Calm people pause. And that pause breaks the spell. Let's start with fear. Fear-based manipulation sounds like this. If you don't act now, you'll miss out. If you don't respond, something bad will happen. If you wait, you'll lose your chance. Fear compresses time, creates urgency, and urgency shuts down discernment. The reactive mind hears urgency and thinks, move. The calm mind hears urgency and asks, why now? That question alone removes leverage. You don't need their permission to slow down. You don't need to match their timeline. Fear only works if you accept it, and calmness refuses automatic acceptance. No emotional hook, no leverage. Now guilt. Guilt manipulation targets your identity as a good person. You should. You owe me. After everything I've done. Guilt pushes you to act against your own boundaries to relieve internal discomfort. That discomfort is the hook. Calm people feel guilt, but they don't obey it blindly. They separate emotion from obligation. They ask, is this actually my responsibility, or just their expectation? Reactive people act to stop feeling bad. Calm people tolerate the feeling and choose deliberately. That tolerance is power. If guilt moves you, it controls you. If you can sit with guilt without acting, it loses all leverage. Ego is one of the easiest hooks to exploit. Disrespect, challenges, subtle insults, anything that threatens status. Manipulators poke ego to provoke reaction. They want you emotional. They want you defending. They want you off-center. Because the moment you react emotionally, you've stepped into their frame. You're now playing their game. Calm people don't chase respect in the moment. They don't rush to correct every slight. They don't bite at every provocation. They understand something reactive people don't. Real status doesn't need instant defense. Silence unsettles ego-based manipulators. Because they don't get the emotional payoff. No emotional hook, no leverage. Urgency deserves special attention. Because urgency is manipulation's favorite weapon. Answer now. Decide now. We need this immediately. Urgency pressures you to act before you evaluate. And whoever controls urgency controls outcomes. Calm people delay by default. Not forever. Just long enough to regain control. They don't apologize for pauses. They don't explain delays. They don't justify their timing. They decide on their schedule, not yours. That alone shuts down most manipulation attempts. Because manipulation hates time. Time exposes intent. Let's move into real environments. Workplace manipulation. A manager pressures you emotionally. They imply disappointment. They escalate urgency. They frame everything as a crisis. Reactive employees scramble. They overcommit. They explain. They take on responsibility that isn't theirs. Calm employees don't rush. They ask clarifying questions. They respond neutrally. They let pressure sit without absorbing it. They don't resist emotionally. They don't submit emotionally. They stay grounded. And grounded people are hard to corner. In relationships, manipulation is even more subtle. Emotional withdrawal. Guilt-laced silence. Sudden mood shifts. The goal is the same. Move you emotionally so you act to restore comfort. Calm individuals notice patterns. They don't chase emotional volatility. They don't rush to fix moods they didn't create. They stay present but not reactive. That stability forces honesty. Because manipulation collapses when emotional leverage disappears. No emotional hook, no leverage. Social dynamics work the same way. People test boundaries through tone and pressure. They push to see what moves you. When you react, you show them where the levers are. When you don't, they stop pushing. Calm people become psychologically heavy. Not intimidating. Not aggressive. Just unmoved. And unmoved people quietly dominate social space. because others don't know how to influence them. Here's a hard truth. Manipulators are not evil geniuses. They're pattern readers. They test reactions and exploit predictability. If you react the same way every time, you are easy to steer. Emotional stability breaks patterns. Unpredictability through restraint. Silence where reaction is expected. Calm where emotion is anticipated. That mismatch disrupts manipulation. That's the key. You have a choice. You can react to emotional pressure, or you can let it pass through without obedience. One gives others leverage. The other removes it entirely. Calmness doesn't fight manipulation. It starves it. Manipulation needs emotional fuel. Calm people don't provide it. This chapter is not telling you to distrust everyone. It's telling you to delay trust until clarity, to stop acting from emotional discomfort, to stop letting feelings decide actions. You can feel fear without obeying it. You can feel guilt without submitting. You can feel anger without reacting. That separation is discipline, and discipline creates freedom. Say it again. No emotional hook, no leverage. Make it your rule. When someone pressures you emotionally, pause. When someone rushes you, slow down. When someone provokes you, go quiet. Not to manipulate back, but to reclaim control. Once you remove emotional hooks, something interesting happens. People reveal themselves. Some become respectful. Some become frustrated. Some escalate. That information matters. And calmness gives you access to it. You are no longer someone who is easily steered. You are someone who decides deliberately. You don't need their permission to stay grounded. You don't need to match emotion to survive interaction. Your stability is your shield. But stability does more than protect you. It also makes you difficult to read. And what people can't read, they can't control. That's where we're going next. Chapter 4. Emotional stability makes you unreadable. Most people are transparent. Not because they want to be, because they can't help it. Their face reacts. Their tone shifts. Their body language leaks information. You don't need to guess how they feel. They show you. And what can be read can be played. That's the key. What they can't read, they can't control. Say it again. What they can't read, they can't control. Predictability is comfort for manipulators. If they know what frustrates you, they know how to rush you. If they know what flatters you, they know how to steer you. If they know what angers you, they know how to provoke you. Predictable emotions create predictable behavior. And predictable behavior is leverage. Emotional stability disrupts that. Not by deception, by restraint. Unreadable does not mean cold. It means contained. It means your internal state is not broadcast. You can feel deeply and still show little. That separation is power. Because the moment others can't read you, they hesitate. And hesitation shifts control. The reactive person responds to the room. The unreadable person becomes the room. Let's talk about silence. Silence is not empty. Silence is pressure. Most people fill silence reflexively. They talk more. They explain. They justify. They reveal. Silence makes insecure people uncomfortable. And discomfort forces mistakes. When you stay silent, others project. They assume. They overthink. They expose intentions. That's not manipulation. That's observation. And observation requires restraint. What they can't read, they can't control. Delayed responses work the same way. Immediate replies feel polite. They also feel reactive. Delayed responses signal independence. They signal that your time and attention are not owned by the moment. You're not rushing to appease. You're not scrambling to explain. You're choosing when to engage. That choice increases perceived authority. You don't need their permission to take time. You don't owe instant reactions. Delay is not avoidance. Delay is command. Neutral expression is another misunderstood tool. People think authority looks intense. It doesn't. Authority looks calm. A neutral expression gives nothing away. No excitement. No irritation. No anxiety. Just presence. When others can't read your emotional state, they lose confidence in their influence. They don't know if their words landed. They don't know if their pressure worked. They don't know what move to make next. That uncertainty benefits you. Here's where most people sabotage themselves. They think being unreadable is rude, so they over-explain. They think silence is awkward, so they fill it. They think pauses look weak, so they rush. That instinct is fear. Fear of being misinterpreted. Fear of being disliked. Fear of losing approval. But authority is not built on comfort. It's built on stability. You have a choice. Relieve tension immediately, or let tension do the work for you. That's the key. Think about high-stakes conversations, negotiations, performance reviews, conflict discussions. The person who speaks first after tension often loses ground. They concede. They soften. They reveal priorities. The unreadable person waits. They let the other side negotiate against themselves. That's not aggression. That's patience. And patience is dominant. Unreadable behavior does something subtle. It shifts attention away from you. Others stop watching your reactions and start watching their own behavior. They self-monitor. They second-guess. They adjust. You become the reference point. That's control without force. What they can't read, they can't control. Let's ground this socially. In group dynamics, emotional people become entertainment. Their reactions become the focus. Their expressions become signals. Unreadable people become anchors. They don't overreact. They don't overperform. They don't chase attention. And ironically, that restraint draws attention. Because people sense weight. They sense depth. They sense self-command. That perception is authority. In conflict, unreadability is especially powerful. Aggression feeds on reaction. When you don't mirror intensity, aggressors lose momentum. They escalate or retreat. Either way, they reveal intent. Your calm forces clarity. Your neutrality removes drama. Drama needs participation. Unreadable people don't participate. They observe. Here's a hard truth. Most people talk themselves out of power. They narrate their feelings. They explain their intentions. They justify their choices. All of that reduces mystery, and mystery creates influence. This is not about playing games. It's about reducing unnecessary exposure. Say less, reveal less, emote less publicly. That doesn't make you fake. It makes you sovereign. You have a choice. You can broadcast your internal state, or you can keep it private. One makes you easy to manage. The other makes you hard to move. What they can't read, they can't control. Make that a rule. Before you respond, ask, does this need to be expressed or just felt? Most emotions don't need expression. They need containment. Let's talk identity. You are no longer someone who reacts visibly. You are someone who absorbs quietly. You don't rush to clarify. You don't chase being understood. You don't overcorrect perceptions. You let time and consistency speak. That patience unnerves emotional players because they don't know where they stand. And when people don't know where they stand, they behave carefully. That's influence. Unreadability compounds. Over time, people stop testing you. They stop pushing. They stop manipulating because they don't get feedback. They don't get traction. You've removed the emotional interface. That's not distance. That's control. This chapter locks in another layer of emotional dominance. Stability made you hard to manipulate. Unreadability makes you hard to read. But there's still a trap left. Even calm, unreadable people lose control when urgency enters the picture, because urgency bypasses discipline. And if you don't master urgency, it will master you. That's what we dismantle next. Chapter 5. Urgency is the enemy of clear judgment. Urgency feels important. It sounds serious. Feels heavy. It demands movement. But urgency is rarely truth. Urgency is pressure wearing authority. And pressure is one of the fastest ways to shut down judgment. That's the core rule of this chapter. Nothing important requires panic. Say it again. Nothing important requires panic. That's the key. Most bad decisions are not caused by lack of intelligence. They're caused by emotional urgency. You knew better. You sensed hesitation. You felt resistance. But you moved anyway. Why? Because the moment felt heavy. Because delay felt dangerous. Because waiting felt like weakness. That feeling is urgency. And urgency hijacks the mind. Urgency compresses time. It makes everything feel like now or never. When time compresses, options disappear. When options disappear, mistakes increase. That's not accidental. Pressure exists to narrow your vision. The calmer you are, the wider your field of view. The more urgent you feel, the smaller it becomes. That's the trade. Let's break down how urgency traps you. Deadlines. Deadlines are real, but the emotional charge around them often isn't. Most deadlines are flexible. Most crises are manufactured. Most immediate demands survive delay just fine. But urgency pushes you to act before you verify, before you assess consequences, before you ask the right questions. That's when people sign bad deals. That's when they overcommit. That's when they say things they can't take back. Nothing important requires panic. Fear fuels urgency. Fear of missing out. Fear of disappointing someone. Fear of losing status. Fear of appearing indecisive. That fear creates speed. Speed feels like decisiveness. But speed without clarity is recklessness. Urgency doesn't want you calm. Urgency wants you obedient. The faster you move, the less you think. The less you think, the more control you give away. If urgency moves you, it controls you. Look at high-pressure sales tactics. Limited time offer. Only a few spots left. Decision must be made today. That urgency is not information. It's manipulation. It's designed to bypass reflection. Calm individuals recognize this immediately. They slow down. They disengage emotionally. They evaluate later. And suddenly the pressure loses power. No panic. No rush. No mistake. In leadership, urgency creates chaos. Reactive leaders panic under pressure. They issue rushed directives. They change plans impulsively. They transmit anxiety downward. Calm leaders do the opposite. They slow the system. They reduce noise. They make fewer decisions but better ones. Their calm becomes containment. That's authority. Nothing important requires panic. In personal life, urgency destroys boundaries. Someone pressures you emotionally. They need an answer now. They need help immediately. They need resolution instantly. If you react, you absorb responsibility that may not be yours. Calm people pause. They ask for time. They refuse to be rushed into commitments. They separate empathy from obligation. That separation protects judgment. Here's a truth most people don't want to admit. Urgency often benefits the person creating it, not the person responding to it. If someone pushes you to decide quickly, ask yourself who benefits from speed. Calm people always ask that question. Reactive people never do. That's the difference. You have a choice. Move fast and feel decisive, or slow down and be correct. Only one of those builds long-term advantage. Urgency creates the illusion of importance. Calmness reveals actual importance. That's the key. Let's talk about false emergencies. False emergencies sound dramatic. They come with raised voices. They come with pressure. They come with emotional language. But when you step back, very few things are truly urgent. Most things survive a pause. And anything that collapses under calm scrutiny was never solid to begin with. Nothing important requires panic. Here's a discipline you must adopt. When urgency hits, do less. Not nothing, just less. Reduce communication. Reduce movement. Reduce commitment. Stability in urgency feels uncomfortable at first, because you're resisting the emotional current. But that resistance protects you. Observe what happens when you don't panic. People reveal motives. Some soften their tone. Some escalate pressure. Some back off entirely. All of that is information, and information restores control. Urgency is a test. It tests whether your discipline is real, whether your calm is conditional, whether pressure still owns you. Passing the test doesn't require brilliance. It requires restraint. Pause. Breathe. Wait. You don't need their permission to take time. You don't need to match chaos to survive it. By now, you should see the pattern. Reaction loses power. Manipulation loses leverage. Unreadability creates hesitation. And urgency is the final emotional shortcut that bypasses all of that if you let it. But once you master urgency, something changes. Your decisions gain weight. Your presence stabilizes others. And people begin to trust your judgment. Why? Because calm decisions compound. That's what we're moving into next. Chapter 6. Emotional stability compounds over time. Most people are obsessed with moments. Big moments. Turning points. Breakthroughs. They think one decision will change everything. It won't. One calm decision rarely changes a life. But repeated calm decisions change who you become. And who you become determines what you attract. That's the core truth of this chapter. Consistency builds authority. Say it again. Consistency builds authority. That's the key. Emotional stability is not impressive once. Anyone can stay calm occasionally. What separates dominant individuals is repetition. Calm today, calm tomorrow, calm under pressure, calm when tested. Over time, people notice patterns, and patterns create reputation. You don't need to announce your discipline. It shows up in how you respond. Reactive people fluctuate. Good day, bad day. Calm mood, explosive mood. Confident one moment, defensive the next. That inconsistency erodes trust. Others don't know what version they'll get, so they hedge. They hold back. They don't rely on them fully. Stable people do the opposite. They are predictable in the right way. Predictable in restraint. Predictable in composure. Predictable in judgment. Consistency builds authority. Think about trust. Trust is not built through charisma. It's built through reliability. When pressure hits, do you collapse or stabilize? When conflict arises, do you escalate or contain? When urgency appears, do you rush or evaluate? Every calm response deposits credibility. Every emotional reaction withdraws it. Over time, the balance becomes obvious. Leadership opportunities don't arrive dramatically. They drift toward the stable. People naturally defer to those who don't panic. They seek input from those who stay grounded. They promote those who don't create chaos under stress. Not because those people ask for power, because others feel safer around them. That safety is influence. Consistency builds authority. Here's a mistake many people make. They think calmness must be visible to count. It doesn't. Most of your discipline is invisible. It happens internally. Moments where you wanted to react but didn't. Moments where you wanted to rush but paused. Moments where you felt provoked but stayed centered. No one applauds those moments, but they stack. Quietly, relentlessly. Let's talk about respect. Respect doesn't come from intensity. It comes from dependability. When people know you won't overreact, they bring you harder problems. When people know you won't panic, they trust you with responsibility. When people know you won't crumble emotionally, they stop testing you. That's how authority forms. Not loudly, but steadily. In long-term relationships, emotional stability is everything. One outburst can be forgiven. Repeated instability cannot. Calm people create emotional safety. Others don't have to manage them. They don't have to tiptoe. They don't have to brace for mood swings. That safety builds loyalty, and loyalty compounds. Here's another hard truth. People don't follow potential. They follow consistency. They don't care how calm you can be. They care how calm you are repeatedly. That's why discipline matters more than motivation. Motivation fluctuates. Discipline repeats. Consistency builds authority. You have a choice. You can chase emotional highs, or you can build emotional reliability. One feels exciting. The other creates power. Emotional stability compounds like interest, small deposits, long time horizon, and eventually the gap becomes undeniable. This is where patience matters. Compounding is slow at first. No recognition, no applause, no immediate payoff, just internal wins. But then something shifts. People start seeking your input. They start deferring to your judgment. They start trusting your presence in chaos. And you didn't ask for any of it. You earned it. Here's how you accelerate compounding. First, eliminate emotional extremes. High highs and low lows kill consistency. Aim for centered. Second, respond the same way under pressure as you do under comfort. That's discipline. Third, stop explaining your calm. Let it speak. You don't need their permission to stay composed. You don't need validation for restraint. Over time, emotional stability becomes part of your identity. People don't say, "They're calm sometimes." They say, "They're always grounded." That's branding without marketing. That's authority without force. That's dominance without aggression. Consistency builds authority. By now, you've learned how to control reactions, how to remove emotional hooks, how to become unreadable, how to defeat urgency. And now you understand compounding. But there's another layer. Emotional stability doesn't just benefit you. It changes the environment around you. Because calm is contagious. And the most stable person in the room sets the emotional temperature. That's what we confront next. Chapter 7. The stable person sets the emotional temperature. Emotion spreads, not because people choose it, because humans synchronize. Tone, energy, urgency, anxiety. Groups don't move randomly. They settle around a reference point. And the strongest reference point is not the loudest voice. It's the calmest presence. That's the core rule of this chapter. The calmest person leads by default. Say it again. The calmest person leads by default. That's the key. Most people think leadership is about direction. It isn't. Leadership is about regulation. When stress enters a room, people subconsciously look for stability. They scan faces. They read posture. They sense tone. Who's panicking? Who's grounded? Who's steady? And they adjust themselves accordingly. You don't have to announce control. Your nervous system communicates it for you. Chaos escalates when emotions feed each other. One anxious person triggers another. One raised voice raises 10 more. That's how meetings spiral. That's how families explode. That's how crises turn into disasters. But calm interrupts contagion. One stable presence absorbs volatility. Not by arguing. Not by commanding. By staying centered. That stability slows the group. And slowing the group restores thinking. Let's start with meetings. You've seen it. Deadlines loom. Tension rises. Voices sharpen. Most people match the anxiety. They speak faster. They interrupt. They overreact. The stable person does the opposite. They speak slower. They say less. They don't rush conclusions. And without trying, they reset the pace. Others follow, because calm feels safe, and safety restores rational thought. The calmest person leads by default. In family conflict, the same rule applies. Arguments escalate when emotions mirror each other. One person yells, another defends, another withdraws. But when one person refuses escalation, the cycle breaks. They don't need to win. They don't need to convince. They stay grounded. That grounded presence de-escalates without surrendering position. Because emotional storms require participation. Calm refuses to participate. In crises, emotional temperature matters most. Panic spreads faster than information, and panic multiplies mistakes. One calm individual can prevent disaster, not by knowing everything, but by stabilizing the environment. Clear tone, measured pace, focused priorities. Others breathe, others slow, others think. That's leadership, not authority given by title. Authority earned through composure. Here's the part most people miss. You don't need to be the most experienced person in the room. You don't need to be the smartest. You don't need the loudest voice. If you are the most stable, people orient toward you. They trust your judgment. They mirror your calm. They defer naturally. The calmest person leads by default. This is why emotional volatility destroys leadership potential. Unstable leaders spread instability. Their anxiety becomes the team's anxiety. Their urgency becomes the system's urgency. Their mood becomes the culture. Calm leaders do the opposite. They create emotional safety, and safety unlocks performance. You have a choice. Add to the emotional noise, or become the stabilizer. One amplifies chaos. The other dissolves it. That choice is available in every room you enter. Here's how you apply this deliberately. First, slow your speech. Speed transmits urgency. Slowness transmits control. Second, reduce reaction. Let others finish. Let tension sit. Third, regulate yourself first. You cannot calm a room you're not calm in. That's the key. Notice something important. You don't have to correct anyone emotionally. You don't have to calm people down. Your presence does it for you. When you don't react, others lose momentum. When you stay grounded, others recalibrate. That's influence without effort. Over time, people associate you with stability. When things get tense, they look to you. Not because you demanded authority, because you embodied it. Consistency builds authority, and authority shapes environments. This chapter marks a shift. Emotional stability is no longer just personal. It's environmental. You are no longer just protecting your state. You are shaping the room. But there's a deeper layer still. Because to sustain this level of control, calm cannot be situational. It must become who you are. An identity, not a tactic. That's what we lock in next. Chapter 8. Emotional discipline is an identity, not a mood. Most people try to stay calm. That's the mistake. Trying implies negotiation. Trying means sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. And under pressure, trying collapses. Emotional stability cannot be situational. It must be automatic. That's the core shift of this chapter. I do not negotiate with my emotions. Say it again. I do not negotiate with my emotions. That's the key. Moods change. Energy fluctuates. Circumstances shift. If your calm depends on conditions, you don't have calm, you have luck. Identity doesn't fluctuate. Identity executes. When something is part of who you are, you don't debate it. You don't decide every time. You act from default. That's discipline. Reactive people ask, how do I feel? Disciplined people ask, who am I? One leads to impulse. The other leads to consistency. When pressure hits, identity responds faster than thought. That's why identity outlasts motivation. Motivation fades. Identity remains. Let's expose the internal negotiation that destroys discipline. Something triggers you. You feel anger rise. And the mind says, just this once. They deserve it. I need to express this. That's negotiation. And negotiation always ends in concession. Emotion argues for expression. Discipline ends the conversation. I do not negotiate with my emotions. This doesn't mean you suppress feelings. It means feelings don't get a vote. They inform, but they don't decide. You acknowledge emotion internally. Then you act according to identity. That separation is mastery. Think about habits. You don't debate brushing your teeth. You don't negotiate showing up to work. You do it because it's who you are. Emotional discipline must reach that level. Not a strategy, a standard. Here's the shift you must make. Stop saying, "I'll try to stay calm." Start saying, "I am calm." Not affirmations, identity declarations. The mind follows what it believes you are. If you see yourself as reactive, you'll justify reactions. If you see yourself as governed, you'll regulate automatically. You have a choice. Live from mood, or live from principle. Mood reacts. Principle executes. Only one builds authority. When calm is your identity, something changes. Triggers lose power. Not because they disappear, but because they hit a locked door. There is no debate. No internal drama. Just restraint. This is why emotional discipline must be decided in advance. You don't wait until the moment. You decide now. I do not react under pressure. I do not rush under urgency. I do not explode under provocation. Those decisions remove friction later. Notice how elite performers operate. They don't improvise under stress. They execute preset standards. Emotional discipline works the same way. Scripts beat impulses. Identity beats mood. I do not negotiate with my emotions. There will be moments you want to break character. Moments where reaction feels justified. That's the test. Passing it reinforces identity. Failing it weakens it. There is no neutral outcome. This chapter locks in permanence. You are no longer calm when it's convenient. You are calm because it's who you are. And once calm becomes identity, another advantage emerges. Others begin to expose themselves, because when you don't react, they have nowhere to hide. That's the next level. Chapter 9. When you stop reacting, others expose themselves. Most people reveal themselves without realizing it. They do it when they're uncomfortable. They do it when they feel pressure. They do it when they're not getting the reaction they expected. Reaction hides truth. Silence exposes it. That's the central rule of this chapter. Silence creates pressure. Pressure reveals truth. Say it again. Silence creates pressure. Pressure reveals truth. That's the key. Reactive people rush to fill space. They explain. They justify. They defend. They think talking gives them control. It doesn't. Talking relieves pressure. And pressure is the only thing that forces honesty. Stable people understand this. They wait. When you stop reacting, something subtle happens. The other person loses their reference point. They expected resistance, or agreement, or emotion. Instead, they get nothing. And nothing creates discomfort. That discomfort activates behavior. Behavior reveals intention. Watch what happens when you stay silent. Some people talk more. They add details. They contradict themselves. They overshare. Others escalate. They increase pressure. They sharpen tone. They provoke harder. Both responses are informative. Silence creates pressure. Pressure reveals truth. Reactive people expose themselves fastest. They can't tolerate uncertainty. They need emotional feedback. When they don't get it, they leak. They show impatience. They show insecurity. They show motive. Stable people don't rush that process. They let it unfold. This applies everywhere. In negotiations, silence forces concessions. In conflict, silence exposes aggression. In relationships, silence reveals dependency. In social dynamics, silence separates confidence from bravado. The person who speaks too much under pressure is telling you something. Listen, here's a mistake many people make. They think silence is passive. It isn't. Silence is active restraint. You are choosing not to interfere with the truth emerging. That choice requires discipline, and discipline creates advantage. Let's talk about overtalking. Overtalking is a stress response. People fill silence to regain control. But control comes from patience, not volume. Every extra word is a clue. Every added explanation reveals priority. Every emotional spike exposes sensitivity. Stable people collect these signals. Reactive people miss them. In confrontation, silence is especially powerful. Aggressive people want reaction. They feed on resistance. When you don't provide it, they destabilize. They either escalate, showing intent, or retreat, showing weakness. Either way, you gain clarity. Silence creates pressure. Pressure reveals truth. This is not about manipulation. It's about not interrupting reality. When you don't react, people show you who they are. Believe them. You have a choice. Interrupt the moment with emotion, or let the moment speak. One clouds judgment. The other sharpens it. There is discomfort in silence. That's intentional. You must tolerate that discomfort, because tolerance is strength. The person who can sit in silence the longest controls the interaction. That's not dominance through force. That's dominance through patience. By now, you should see the pattern clearly. Reaction blinds you. Calmness reveals. And revelation is power. Once you can see clearly, you can choose precisely. This chapter prepares you for the final lock-in. Because once you stop reacting, and others expose themselves, there's only one step left. You must make calm your permanent state. Not situational. Not conditional. Permanent. That's the final identity shift. Chapter 10. Make emotional stability your permanent advantage. Everything you've learned so far leads here. This is not another tactic. Not another tool. Not another mindset to try. This is the final decision. Emotional stability is no longer something you practice. It is something you are. That's the core declaration of this chapter. I am internally governed. Say it again. I am internally governed. That's the key. Most people live externally governed lives. Their emotions respond to circumstances. Their behavior reacts to people. Their state fluctuates with the environment. That is not freedom. That is dependence. Internal governance reverses the equation. Your internal state is self-directed. External chaos loses authority. This is your invisible advantage. No one can see it immediately, but they feel it. They feel it when you don't rush. They feel it when you don't react. They feel it when you don't flinch under pressure. That presence changes dynamics before words are spoken. Let's be clear. This does not mean you become emotionless. It means emotion no longer drives behavior. You feel without leaking. You observe without absorbing. You respond without reacting. That separation is mastery. Identity is what executes when thinking stops. Under stress, you don't rise to intentions. You fall to identity. So you decide identity now. I am someone who governs my internal state. That decision removes hesitation later. Here's what permanent emotional stability looks like. Pressure enters, you slow down. Provocation appears, you go neutral. Urgency rises, you pause. Not because you force yourself, because it's your default. You don't negotiate. You don't explain. You execute restraint. This identity gives you leverage everywhere. In work, you become reliable under stress. In relationships, you become emotionally safe. In conflict, you become unmovable. In chaos, you become the anchor. People adjust to you because you no longer adjust to chaos. You will notice something important. Once emotional stability becomes permanent, life feels quieter, less internal noise, less mental friction, fewer regrets. You waste less energy on reactions. That energy returns as clarity. Clarity sharpens decisions. Decisions shape outcomes. You have a choice. Live governed by emotion, or live governed by principle. One keeps you reactive. The other makes you sovereign. I am internally governed. From this point forward, your standard is clear. You do not rush. You do not explode. You do not explain under pressure. You remain grounded by identity. That identity compounds daily. This audiobook was never about staying calm. It was about reclaiming control. Control of attention. Control of behavior. Control of outcomes. Emotional stability is the foundation of all three. As you move forward, remember this. The world will test you. People will provoke. Urgency will appear. Chaos will knock. Those are not threats. They are reminders. Reminders to return to governance. Say it one final time. I am internally governed. Carry that into every room. Carry that into every decision. Carry that into every pressure-filled moment. Because the calmest person doesn't just survive. They dominate quietly, consistently, permanently. You don't need permission. You don't need validation. You don't need to prove anything. You are governed from within. And that is the real advantage. Emotional stability is not about being calm once. It is about being unmovable always. While others rush, you pause. While others react, you observe. While others burn energy proving themselves, you conserve power. This is why emotionally stable people rise quietly and stay there. From this moment forward, your emotions are no longer in charge. You are. The challenge is simple. In every moment of pressure, choose control over reaction. Choose restraint over release. Choose stability over chaos. Do this long enough and the world will adjust to you. Not because you demanded power, but because you embodied it.